Righto, gents, here we are. We've done our little bit of planning, so we can see that this is what this is going to look like. So remember, making HTML is just like finding a structure for the thing. So I've changed the title up here to postcode. Pretty well, all that does is what? So what's the title actually change?
Makes the tab browser.
Yeah, just the tab name will be called postcodes.
Yeah.
Okay, first thing down here, we want to put a heading. How do we do a heading?
H1.
Lovely. And we'll call it whatever we want to call it. Okay, there's no need to put a break on that, it will do it by itself. How do I put the word postcode there?
You can put a paragraph.
Yeah, you can put a paragraph, or you can just be a lazy sod and just put postcode. And I'll put a break on the end. Remember, breaks are the equivalent of hitting enter. So it's going to say postcode. So that bit's done. What happens next?
Oh, we want an input.
Lovely. Okay, what is the first thing you should do with input boxes? Okay, we give them a name. So when we need to ask it something or retrieve something, we know what it's going to get from.
We're going to call it postcode.
Okay, we'll just call it postcode. That makes sense. Any other stuff we usually put in there?
Value.
What's value do?
Gives it a value.
Okay, that's its default value. So how about we start it with our own type of thing? What is the smallest postcode that we're going to allow?
0. Another 1.
Okay, so here's our list over here. The smallest one is actually 800. So that's Darwin, I think. Okay, so 800 is the smallest postcode. What's the biggest postcode?
7,900.
So 7799. Okay, so we can put a min. Whoops, not over there. Okay, so back over here, we can put a minimum value of 800, and we can put a max of 7799. Okay, how do postcodes, they go up in 1s or 6s or 10s? Or? They just go up in 1s. What you can do, let's say postcodes went up in 10s, you can actually put a thing called step. And so our little arrows out the end will make it go up by 10s. Postcodes just go up in singles, or they can be single ones. So, righto, that's that bit done. We now need to make a button, but before we do that, I'm just going to shove a break on the end. Okay, buttons are pretty simple affairs. What would be a good name? Well, what do we do here? So usually we click the things. You can do things on mouse over and on hover and all those type of things as well. But usually we click buttons. People are pretty programmed in doing that already. What goes in the brackets?
The function.
Yeah, the function. Yeah, we'll call it find postcode, that'll do. And remember, it is a function, so functions have the brackets giving each themselves a bit of a hug at the end. Okay, the last bit you need to do is put some text. And we're finding the state. So we might even, we'll leave that, that'll do. Okay, and finally, we'll put another break there. And lucky last, we've got to do this output bit. So that's when we hit our button, it goes and does whatever in JavaScript. It's going to come back here. And what do we put there? So where's our, how do we show or place something so the output's going to go?
Don't you have to have like source?
Yeah, we'll get to that. There's one bit before. So remember the P one?
Oh yeah.
Okay, state here, or something like that. So all that is a place marker. P technically is P for paragraph, but you can use it sort of like a paragraph, postal place, place marker, whatever you want to call it. So essentially when we send our stuff back, it's going to sit there. So our output will sit at the bottom of our screen. It's not going to sit halfway between the heading and the word postcode or whatever. Sometimes you'll send back multiple things. So you might send back 5 or 6 pieces of information. In this case, we've got it pretty simple. The last job we have here is to link up our JavaScript. So if we just put script, you've got to give it a source. And because we've only got one JavaScript file, it's not rocket science to pick which one you need. And it will close the tag. So by the time you get to that stage, this is what we should have. So all going to plan. There's our heading, there's our little bit of text, there's our button, there's our input box, it's got its default value. Because it's, what's wrong with it? What did we forget to do?
Oh, you need to put number, so you can only input numbers.
Righto, so we'll go and fix that bit. Okay, so where does that go?
In the input.
Okay, so somewhere in there, you've got to put type equals number. Okay, and that will restrict you from typing letters. So you see a couple of seconds ago, I could type letters in there. So quick squeeze before we move on. So there's our default value, and you'll see we've got buttons. We can go up and down by 1. Remember that step bit? If I put step equals 10, every time I click that, it will jump up by 10s, or 20s, or 15s, or 0.5s, or 0.1s, or whatever you want to do with it. So now we'll have a look at doing the JavaScript. So you'll remember, hopefully, that pretty well everything we do is input, process, output. Okay, so we get something, we do something with it, and then we spit it out at the end. What particular information do we need to get?
We need the input.
So here's our input bit. So we might have a function called get check postcode. Okay. You remember when we get it, sometimes we actually need to check that it's a valid number. So I could still use those arrow keys to get down to 800. But then I could actually go in and say the postcode is -42, or the postcode is 90210, or whatever, those type of things. So by doing that, sure, we can sort of proof it in our HTML to limit it. So if they're using the arrows, they're not going to get beyond that. But we all know you've got to still check that. So what is our job when we check the postcode? So what are we actually doing?
Getting the number effectively.
Yep. So ask and store
Number.
Okay, what did you think I put postcode in angry writing?
Oh, this is a variable.
It will be a variable. Okay, we also need to validate postcode, and we can give ourselves
800 to 7,799.
a little bit of a clue there. Again, blokes, our plan is just us writing out this is what we want to do. It's not rocket science. I know in digital solutions they've become quite technical about how plans are written, and you've got to have them in using certain words in certain places, which I don't necessarily like, but who am I to change that? Okay, once we've done that, essentially that function will exist and we won't go anywhere until we get it right. So until they give us a postcode that's in our valid range, we're just going to continually tell them, sorry buddy, I don't like that. Okay, our next one is our processing bit. We might call it find state. So how are we going to work out the states?
The postcode is equal to.
So where would you start? So we've now got a variable called postcode that's we know is legitimate. So how would you do it for Queensland?
Use a word to
Do we need to use a loop? How do we check something? With an if. So, because we know our number's valid, we don't really need to ask them over and over again, have you given us a good number? So, can we do something as simple as this?
Postcode greater than
Postcode is equal to
Okay, if postcode is
or is less than this number.
greater than or equal to 4,000 and okay, what do we want to do if that's the case?
Have an output of baseline.
Okay,
the output of that stack.
okay, it shouldn't have that there, that's not JavaScript. Okay, would you need to do anything different for all the other states?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've just got to change.
You just got to change the value. So,
You don't care about it, right?
okay, if you really wanted to, you could include the ACT and go and pick out that particular range and play around, because New South Wales essentially have got 3 different sort of sections that they can be in. To make it a little bit simpler, if it starts with a 2, we're just going to say it's in New South Wales. Well, it's within the New South Wales border, anyway. Okay, do we need to do anything else? No. Righto, last bit, we've got to do our output. So I forgot to do that. So here's our process bit. Oh, can't write. Here's our output bit. So we're going to display state. What do we need to do in display state?
I'm going to have to display the HTML.
Okay. Right, do we need to know technically how you do that? No. So if we're using a different language, so not using JavaScript, it will do it slightly differently, but essentially the process is the same. Okay, do you think that will do the job?
Yeah.
So we're getting our value, we validate it, we then allocate it to a state, and then we display it back in our HTML. Righto, so we've got over here our thing. Remember, JavaScript has nothing in it when you start. So when you start HTML, it's got a bit of structure to it, but what's the first thing we need to put in our JavaScript?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's called declaring your variables is the technical word. Again, if you get yourself to a party and you're talking about declaring variables, there'll be certain people who'll understand and there'll be a lot who won't. So you might have to get to the right party to make a lot of sense out of it, but a bit like talking SQL. That's right. Okay, so what variables do we have? We've definitely got one called postcode, and it will be a number, so we just say it's equal to 0 at the start. That's called initializing your variables. Back in the day, we had to do that for every program. So when I started doing programming many moons ago, it would say, it would make a place for postcode, but unless you put initialized, it'll put it to a starting value, it would just get whatever bit of rubbish was in memory at that time. So you got some interesting stuff. We'll have one called state, and it's going to be some text. So we leave it like that. And I'm just going to have one called message. So this is the thing that we're going to send back to the HTML. So it will exist down in this bit here. So our output. Righto. What happens next? So we'll do our main function. to get us started.
Check the postcode.
Okay, what was the name of our main function?
Check the post.
So this thing here.
Find postcode.
Find postcode.
Okay, it's not a bad habit to get into, to just cut and paste and get it like that. So what is the name of our first? So that's our main function. It's a bit like the overall thing. So if I tell my kids to go and feed the chooks, I don't go and say, go and open the shed, grab this, do this. It's just the overall big idea. So my first function is this one here called get. So I simply say, no I don't, I just say get, check, postcode, and it will be a function. So that's my first task. Okay, when you do your assignment in a week or 3, you'll probably end up with 30 or 40 functions in your program. Okay, and a function just does a job. So this thing's job is to just get the postcode and check it. The next one, find state, is to get the state and allocate what state it is, and finally display state, fairly obvious what it would do. Okay, you don't need to do anything fancy in there. It's just, essentially we have 3 stages. So we get our input, we process it, we spit it out. Once we've done that, we can start doing okay, so now we're purely looking at this little bit here. So how do we get a value and store it? And then how do we check it?
Good. So do you have to put anything for the sources from the HTML?
Not really. Okay, so we're going to get stuff and put it into that postcode variable. What are we going to get?
We're using the document.
Yep, so what over here are we getting?
Getting the postcode.
This thing here, isn't it? It's the value they enter in that postcode. Okay, if you're clever, what type of variable are we getting? What type of number? A whole number. So what we can do is do parseInt straight away. What does parseInt do?
Forces it to be an integer.
Yeah, it forces that variable to live as an integer. So live as a whole number. So by doing that straight up, you restrict it. So remember our lesson a couple back when we had 13 plus 3 and it kept saying it was 133. It was treating them as strings. So when you put that little plus sign in between 13 and 3, it concatenated it. Another good word to get the ladies, I'd imagine.
You want to concatenate it.
No, Tom, you don't want to concatenate. Okay, you're too young. Okay, we then get into our good old mate, get element by ID. What particular thing are we grabbing? So what ID are we interested in getting? Postcode. So in other words, we're interested in grabbing this thing here. So whatever they typed into the input box, we're going to bring over here, and we're particularly interested in its value. So we're not interested in how many characters long it is or how big the box is or any of those other things that we could potentially look at. We're just interested in its value. Okay, more importantly now, how do we check it? So we've got the value, so 4350 or 2214 or whatever is sitting in that variable. How do we check that it's a number that we like?
So it's got a bit of an issue of putting that.
We're on again. Righto. We've got to check this thing. So if I just wanted to check something once, I would use what? An if. Okay, what if the person using your little postcode state finder is having a bad day or they're clumsy and they hit too many keys a lot? Okay, how do you do it so they can have multiple goes at getting it wrong? So we're going to use a loop. You have 3 choices. What are your 3 loops?
When
No, where's not a loop. Okay. Look, for loop. So that's definite iteration. That's what we did yesterday.
Else.
No, else goes with an if. Do we remember do while and while do?
No,
Yeah.
Okay. So a while loop is a bit like an if, but it will let you do it over and over again. So while, and what numbers don't we like?
This being 800 and
So if our postcode is less than 800, we don't like it. Or, remember or is the sticks. If our postcode is greater than 7799. So if it's in that range, obviously we're not happy with it. And if that's the case, we just put the curly brackets out. What are we going to do to them?
Oh, we want a notification for what it's called, but it's a box that is.
So we can put a box up called an alert that will say you've stuffed up or something nice like, sorry, you have
choices.
Okay, what is the other thing that's like an alert but it allows you to enter a new value? Prompt. Okay, so what we can do is say whatever we put a prompt up there. Again, what type of value are we going to expect? An integer. So if we go, our good old mate pass int, and then we put a prompt, and then we put a message, postcode must be between 800 and 7799, inclusive. No, Tom, you just let them go like that. Okay, I'll just widen this a little bit so I can see all of that in one hit. Okay. So, here's our variable. So we don't like our postcode. So there's no point keeping it alone. So we come in here, if they give us a number that's less than 800 or a number that's bigger than 7799, we're going to ask them again. So this is the asking bit, the prompt. And all the prompt does, put that message up and there'll be a box, an input box there to type it in. Okay, once they give us that, we force it to be an integer again. Okay. It will then put that value. So first time they typed, if they put 20 million as the postcode, it's obviously not going to like that. It'll come in here, ask them again. If they do it properly, put 4350, it will put 4350 into the postcode bit. It then goes up and checks again. Is 4350 less than that? No, it's not. Is it greater than that? No, it's not. So we're happy. If on the other hand, they stuff up multiple times, it will continue to ask them over and over and over again to re-enter that value. Okay? Makes sense? Righto, so now we have validated it. Why is it so important to validate stuff?
Because people make mistakes.
Okay, people stuff up all the time. They're great at it. Righto, so now we have completed our first job. So we've asked for the postcode and we've validated it. It's very important to be able to validate your input because people stuff up, as we've said, a lot. For your assignment, you'll need to validate input a lot as well. So this will be a very useful little thing to look at down the track. Okay, our next function is called find state. Okay, and it's just an if statement or a series of if statements. There is a thing in JavaScript called switch where you can put sort of a range of values and jump in, but essentially it takes the same amount of time to complete as doing a heap of ifs. So this is our Queensland one. So if our postcode is less than or equal, greater than or equal to 4,000, and, so remember and is the ampersands. So this one is an or, so it's saying if it's this or this, because obviously you can't have a number that is less than 800 and it's also greater than 779.
What's and?
That one, to Amphithenes is their
What do I find
technical.
them on my keyboard?
Above the 7 is where mine lives. Okay, and your postcode is less than or equal to 499. Okay, so if you're in that range, so if you think of 4350, we all know that's a valid one. It is greater than or equal to 4000, and it's also less than that. So remember, and is both true. So if Sam and Ben are having a bit of a disagreement, throwing a few haymakers at each other,
Was he drowning?
I would say Sam and Ben leave the room, and I would only be happy if both are true. Okay, if I say Sam or Ben leave the room, I'm happy if either of them leave the room. So that's the difference between the two. Okay, I then need to allocate state as Queensland. So I would just say, here's my state, and it is Queensland. Make sense? Okay, I'm just going to do one more state. So,
Can you copy and paste it?
yeah, of course you can. Okay, so I've done Queensland and Victoria. So anything with a 3 is in Victoria. So where's our list of stuff? Up in the top corner here. So if we have a quick squiz at that, so all the 3s are there, all the 4s are Queensland. South Australia go up to there. So you would just go and change those values to represent that.
What's the number?
And I'll just throw a comment there that you would put the other states there at some stage. I'm not going to spend 4 or 5 minutes wasting our time with that. Okay, last bit we need to do is display that state. So here's my third function. It is called display state, and I'm going to make use of my little message variable. So making our message variable just removes a little bit of complication from our program. So this is where we're going to make up our little sentence to say blah 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 is in whatever. So how do I say 4350 is in Queensland? So where do I get 4350? Where's it hiding at the moment?
In the imports.
Okay, it's in the postcode variable. I'm then going to add some text of my own. Okay, and then I'll put a plus. What do the plus signs mean? That's concatenating. So this variable called message will say something like 4350 is my own words, and then we're going to put the name of the state there. And then just to make sure we have a full stop on the end, I would concatenate it on the end. One way you can think of concatenating is these are train wagons. So here is our train called message. The first wagon is our postcode variable, and then we join it. So what's the job for people who join trains up down in the railway yards? Those trains don't join themselves up. They have people called shunters, and their job is to join them up. Pretty risky job. You slip over, train runs over you, you're either dead or you've got missing bits. Train wagons and engines and stuff aren't too... My dad used to work at the railway, and one of his jobs was to pump up the train tyres.
They don't
So,
have tyres, sir.
very good. I've had whole classes go for days thinking that, well, my dad used to pump up the train tyres. They do go flat though, apparently. So instead of being round, they might get wear a bit.
They don't go flat, so
They don't go flat, they wear down. Yeah.
Come on, man.
So I've had, you say that to grade 7 or 8s, and it's sometimes 10 minutes later that some little mate will go, hang on, what's going on here? Okay, last bit. We now need to get this message and put it over here. So I have a little spot already assigned for it. It's a bit like we bought a block of ground and here we're going to build our house or park our train in this case. So here's our train called message. Okay, how do we get stuff from JavaScript and put it back into HTML?
Link it.
Sort of. So this is where our document dot our mate comes back, but this time it's different to up here. So up here we were getting it and putting it into a variable. This time we've already got the variable and we're sending it back. So we're going to put it into our state here. Our good old mate inner HTML comes into play. When you think of inner HTML, just try and think I'm going to put this into HTML. So rather than inner, think into. So I'm going to put my message variable. So it is going, so just watch this on the screen, Blakes. This message is going to go into HTML in this place. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So this is like it's a delivery address, like your Australia Post or one of the courier businesses.
Are we good to run?
Okay, once you have got that done, you hold your tongue the right way. We kick it in the guts and see what we get. Okay, what do you expect if I hit find state now?
Nothing.
Okay, 4350 is in Queensland. If I go and change that to a Victorian one, that's in Victoria. What if you put a number that is too small? So 63 as a postcode. What would we expect to get here?
We get the prompt.
So this is where our prompt should kick in. So there's my nice little message. And again, if I stuff up and put a really massive number in, again, it will just ask me again. It will sit in that little prompt box forever until I give it a number it likes. Again, if I give it a postcode that it likes, it will change over here. Okay, if I put a number that's way too big, it will give me this message. If I put some text in, what do you think will happen?
It will right now, mate.
Okay, it actually sucks it up but dies. So it's a little bit strange that way.
Let's go to it.
Yes, Sam. Okay, again, if I get it wrong the first time with a number, get it wrong a second time, it will just stay there. What do you think if I put 6666 in? Okay. Why is it saying it's in Queensland?
Well, that's because we haven't put in all the states.
Yep, so all the states aren't there, but why is it still saying it's in Queensland?
That's the last one that was displayed.
Okay, yeah, Lewis has got it right. That's the last one that was displayed. So if I go in and stuff it up intentionally, get this up here, and I put a value that's not all our sixes, what do we expect it to say down here?
So it's in Victoria.
Okay. That is because at the moment, the variable called state has got Victoria stored in it. Okay, and until we do something that changes that, it will stay running in that way. Any questions, gents? Yes?
So can you please just show the JavaScript thing?
Yep. So I'll just spread that out a bit.
At the bottom. Thanks.
Okay, I'll stop this now, Blakes. So